So in Galatia, there were also some Gentiles that had converted to Judaism. They are what's known as proselytes. And to the point where also a Gentile that had become a Christian was considered a proselyte, because for a Gentile to become a Christian, they would convert to Judaism first. So there was this culture of Judaism, Christianity being kind of the completion of Judaism. So you'd be a Jew and then you'd be a Christian, you wouldn't ever circumnavigate Judaism to get to Christianity. They were seen as like tied together, really intricately connected. And even when a Christian, they would be expected to live like a Jew and following the law and everything. There are two kinds of proselytes. There's a proselyte of the gate. It's kind of like a half proselyte. They're mentioned in Acts 13. They're referred to as God-fearers. They're not circumcised. They follow the 7 precepts of Noah, which I keep meaning to look up, and I'm sorry I've forgotten. If you want to know what those are, you look them up, or nag me on Facebook and I'll look them up. They didn't do all the Jewish things, but obviously we read from the account in Acts 13 that they were receptive to what Paul had to say. They were receptive to the gospel. And then there was a proselyte of righteousness. That's a full proselyte. They were finished with their Gentile lives. They didn't want to be Gentiles anymore. They wanted to be considered full Jews. They wanted to go into synagogues, follow the law to the letter. Often, some of these guys were more legalistic than ethnic Jews, possibly because they felt like they had stuff to prove, because they were like, well, we're choosing to be Jews, so we have to be like the best Jews we can be. The Jews actually made like a 13th tribe just for them. So as well as Jews, Gentiles, and proselytes, which are kind of this like grey area, who ethnically they're not Jews, but they were living as Jews, there were also Judaizers. It's from the Latin, which I'm not going to be able to pronounce, but I'll give a go. Iadurizo. Sorry, Brandon, I know you're Italian. I'm sure that was probably really offensive, bad Latin. It's spelled Iudarizo. It means to be like a Jew. They're mentioned in Acts 14 as part of the Lystrian mob, the mob that takes Paul out, stones him and leaves him for dead. In Galatians 1 verse 7, they're referred to as, but there are some who are confusing you and want to pervert the gospel of Christ. That's them. And in 2 verse 13, other Jews joined him in this hypocrisy, so that even Barnabas was led astray. These are the Judaizers. They're believers in the sect of the Pharisees. For them, it was about religion, not ethnicity. So they would accept a Judaizer. They were Judaizers. They would accept a proselyte because it was about religion. So they weren't just saying, "Oh, you have to be a Jew to be a Christian," as in you have to be ethnically a Jew, but you have to live as a Jew to be a Christian. Specifically, you have to be circumcised. They're what I want you to remember when we talk about them, because it's easy to look at them and go, "Those idiot Judaizers." They were Christians. A lot of them were Christians. A lot of the problem in Galatia is that there were members of the church who loved Jesus who were Judaizers. And what they didn't understand was the concept of being justified by faith. They thought it was all about works, all about the law. Like when we go through, and I'm sure you noticed the contrast between like the law and the promise, spirit versus flesh. What other repeating themes did I see? Slave versus child. The works versus faith. Like these are the things that Paul is having to address, because the Judaizers don't understand it. They don't get it. They thought that if all the Gentiles had done was give up idols for Jesus, they thought that was a cheap form of grace. And like I said before, that circumcision was the only true way to get salvation. The Judaizers told a certain number of lies about Paul, which is one of the reasons why Paul wrote the letter, was to assert his authority as an apostle and to refute these lies of the Judaizers. Number 1, Paul has changed his gospel since his last visit to Galatians. Now, all these lies we see Paul refer to in the letter and refute through the stuff he says to the Galatians. So, I'll give you the verse references as well. So, Paul has changed his gospel. So, in 1 verse 7 and 9, not that there is another gospel, even if we or an angel from heaven should proclaim to you a gospel contrary to what we proclaim to you, let that one be accursed. Anyone proclaims to you a gospel contrary to what you received, let that one be accursed. Like, there is no other gospel. Paul is saying quite clearly there. It's only the one we gave you. Even if I do come and say a different thing, like, I want to go to hell. Like, let me be accursed, let me be damned. Like, I want no part of any false gospel. Paul is not an apostle, they said. 1 verse 1, Paul, an apostle. Paul is pleasing man with a watered down gospel. 1 verse 10, am I now seeking human approval or God's approval? If I was still pleasing people, I would not be a servant of Christ. Again, quite clear. No, I am serving Jesus. Paul doesn't have approval of the mother church in Jerusalem. Was another lie. But if you look at chapter 2, verse 1 to 10, it's all about how he went. He met with them. He met with these pillars of the church. He met with James and with Cephas, or Peter, who were considered, James the brother of Jesus, and Peter, he was a big deal. And he met with them and they said, hey, this is what I'm doing. That okay? And they went, yes, carry on. Peter doesn't agree with Paul, they said. But then in 2 verse 11, we see that actually Paul has to call Peter out on some stuff. It's to the point where Peter humbles himself and listens to what Paul has to say. So, pardon me. So obviously, Paul does agree with Peter. Peter does agree with Paul because he's willing to be chastised and disciplined by him. Paul doesn't care about the Galatians. They're saying, well, where is he? If he loves you, where is he? But then in 4 verse 8 to 20, we feel this heartache where he talks about them as his children, how he wishes that he could be with them. He loves them so much, and he wants to be with them. It says that Paul isn't submitted to the church in Jerusalem. Paul talks in 21 to 31 of verse 21 to 31 of chapter 4. He talks about what the truth about Jerusalem is, how there's a spiritual Jerusalem that we are now to submit to. It's not about the earthly Jerusalem, but that Paul is submitted to this spiritual Jerusalem. And then they say that Paul's law-free gospel leads to immorality. And that's why in 13 to 25 of chapter 5, he talks about the gifts of the Spirit.